So, in today's video, I'd like to talk about what is often described as one of the UK's smallest castles in Somerset, and that is Nunney Castle. So, let's get into the video. Nunney Castle is certainly a small castle, but it's not the smallest. It's known for its relatively compact size and its location on a small island within a moat. The castle's relatively small dimensions, especially its keep and the fact that its corner towers nearly touch, contribute to this perception. The castle dates back to the 1370s and was built by John Delamere, who was a knight in the court of King Edward III, who was given permission to turn his manor house into Nunney Castle in 1373. John died in 1383 and is buried in All Saints Church in Nunney, which is not that far from the castle. John was possibly motivated and inspired to build the castle in a French style from what he saw during his time while fighting in France. So let's have a look at some of the key features that are normally associated and seen with the French castle style. Steeply pitched roofs, often hit and sometimes gabled. These roofs are a prominent feature, often topped with iron crestings. Decorative dormers. These windows punctuating the roof line add a visual interest and are often ornamented with carvings. Towers and turrets are features to add to the castle's imposing presence and are often incorporated into the design itself. Courtyards are open spaces within the castle structures, provide a sense of grandeur and can be beautifully landscaped or used for multiple purposes. Intricate detailing, ornate carvings, sculptures and other decorative elements are commonly seen, reflecting the Renaissance influence. Conical roofs, often seen on towers, are a distinctive feature, usually made of slate and sometimes with decorative tiles. And finally, large windows, often with elaborate surrounds, allow for ample natural light and views. Some of these features can actually be seen in the design of Nunney Castle. The architectural historian Nicholas Pevsner described the castle as aesthetically the most impressive castle in all of Somerset. The resulting castle centred on a stone tower keep measuring 60 feet by 24 feet, or 18 by 7 metres internally, and 54 feet, or 16 metres tall, with 4 round corner towers. The tower keep had 8 foot, 2.4 metre thick walls and was designed around 3 floors. The corner towers had conical roofs and prominent machicolations. The ground floor of the tower house included the kitchen and other service areas. The functions of the first and second floor are uncertain. One theory is that the first floor was another service area, with the hall on the second floor. Another approach argues that the first floor formed the hall and the second floor living accommodation. A minority view proposes that the first floor was actually an armoury. The third floor was used as living accommodation for the owning family. The original design had a number of windows and fireplaces on the upper floors, but the hall would have been relatively dark and the stairs were inconveniently narrow. The tower keep had a modest entrance, which was reached by a drawbridge that lay across the surrounding moat, which initially reached right up to the base of the castle. A simple 12-foot, or 3.6 metre high bailey wall with minimal defensive value surrounded the moat, which was in contrast wide, 10-foot, or 3 metres deep, and would have been difficult for any attacker to drain. On the east side of the castle, Nunney Brook was used as a line of defence rather than a bailey wall. Nunney Castle was inherited by John's son, Philip Delamere, and grandson Elias, before passing by marriage into the Paulet family following Elias's probable death during Henry V's campaigns in France around 1415. Nunney Castle was owned by the Paulet family for roughly 157 years, from the early 15th century until 1572. William Paulet, the Marquis of Winchester, was the final member of the family to own the castle. After his death in 1572, it passed rapidly through several owners and, in 1577, was sold by Switton Thorpe to John Parker, who kept it for 1 year before selling it to Richard Prater at a cost of £2,000. The castle was redeveloped in the second half of the 16th century, probably by the Praters. The windows were enlarged to let in more light, a grand staircase was built in one of the towers, a Catholic altar was installed, and a revetment was built around the inside of the moat, leaving it 25 feet or 7.6 metres wide. During the 17th century, England was torn apart when, in 1643, war broke out between the Roundheads who supported Parliament, took up arms against the King and his royalists.
Richard Prater, who was the owner of Nunney Castle at the time when war broke out, was a staunch Catholic and firm supporter of King Charles I. Throughout the early years of the war, royalist dominance in the southwest meant Nunney Castle was untouched by the conflict. But this changed after the king's last major field army at the Battle of Naseby in June 1645 was defeated and parliamentary forces started reducing royalist garrisons. Nunney Castle started taking in refugees and many Catholics as a result and prepared for an attack. Both sides would have been using similar forms of arms, so let's take a look at some of them. The matchlock musket was the most commonly used musket during the English Civil War. It was the primary infantry weapon of the time. It was a muzzle-loaded weapon where a slow-burning match was used to ignite the gunpowder. Flintlocks were also used and became more popular over time. Just like the rifles, matchlock and flintlock pistols were also used, with the latter becoming more prominent later in the conflict. While matchlocks were more common initially, the flintlock's faster ignition and improved reliability led to its increased adoption. Bows and crossbows were not entirely absent, though they were not a dominant weapon. Some historical accounts suggest that crossbows, along with longbows, might have been used in the early stages of the war, particularly in sieges or by militias. Cannons in the English Civil War were used for both sieges and field battles, but they were particularly effective in sieges. While not always accurate or devastating in open battles, they were instrumental in reducing fortifications and could instill fear into the enemy. The siege began on September the 18th, 1645, when the army arrived at Nunney Castle with 2 regiments of soldiers and cannons that had been brought up from Shepton Mallet. The castle was defended by Richard Prater and his 80 men. It is said that Prater mocked the attackers by hoisting a Catholic crucifix flag above the castle and refused to surrender. However, due to the damage that had been caused by the cannons, particularly on the north side, they surrendered 2 days later. Due to the damage caused by the cannons, the castle escaped the slighting or deliberate damaging that occurred to many other castles at the end of the Civil War. The exact number of casualties from the siege are not known, nor the number of cannon shots fired at the castle, but apparently a cannonball, or the cannonball, as some records state, that was the only cannonball fired, now resides in All Saints' Church, safely locked away. Nonetheless, Richard Prater was forbidden to return to the castle, despite his promises to support Parliament, and his son, George Prater, only recovered Nunney from its interim owners after Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660. The damage to Nunney Castle left the structure as little more than a gutted ruin, but it was restored back into a habitable residence. The burnt-out floors were replaced, and the north side, which had suffered from the artillery bombardment, was rebuilt. The castle declined and was sold by the Praters to William Whitchurch around 1700. During the 18th century, the building was still in reasonable condition, and, in 1789, an order was received to make it ready to receive French prisoners, although it is unlikely they ever arrived. The castle remained inhabited for much of the 18th century, but thereafter was abandoned and allowed to drift into ruin. Richard Prater and his wife are now buried in All Saints' Church in Nunney. By the 20th century, Nunney Castle was increasingly ruined and covered in thick ivy. As a result, on Christmas Day in 1910, a portion of the damaged wall entirely collapsed. Most of the fallen stone is believed to have been stolen by the local residents. In 1926, with the fabric of the castle under threat, the owner, Robert Bailey Neal, transferred the property to the Commissioner of Works, who began a programme of restoration. The current bridge to the castle was built in the 1990s and has been closed off since June of this year, due to it being unsafe to cross. The English Heritage hopes to raise around £150,000 to construct a steel and timber bridge that will allow the castle to be enjoyed by locals and visitors alike for many generations. Let's now have a look into some of the supposed hauntings that are meant to have occurred in and around Nunney Castle. The castle grounds were rumoured to have hosted several witch trials as part of the Somerset witch trials, headed by Robert Hunt JP. A zealous witch hunter in the 1660s, he personally led a hunt for 8 years, tracking down a hellish knot of witches in Somerset, and presided over the many cases of suspected witchcraft brought forward at the assizes held at Taunton Castle. One story is that of a cloaked woman or grey lady who is said to walk beside the moat at dawn around the castle. Her history is a little sketchy, but it is thought that she was accused of witchcraft and put to death outside the castle walls. People have reported seeing dark figures in the upper levels and have felt like they are being watched from above. Stone throwing is also another common activity here too. Other reports mention of seeing a large black horse and a rider that is said to trot down the main street and right up to the castle entrance, sometimes accompanied by a very large black dog. Some people believe this to be Richard Prater himself. The locals still talk of rumours surrounding buried treasure somewhere beneath the castle ruins, and there being a secret tunnel running from the castle to the Church of All Saints right opposite. There is a warning near the gate leading up to the castle prohibiting the use of metal detectors. Could this sign be intended to discourage treasure hunters from searching for the rumoured buried treasure, or the supposed tunnel connecting the castle to the local church? That now brings us to the end of the history of Nunney Castle. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, drop a like and hit the subscribe button. I also want to say a massive thank you so much for the increase in subscribers and viewer count recently. It means more than you could know, and that just motivates me to keep making more videos. So with all that being said, thank you all very much, and I'll see you in the next one.